It's time for the Tigers Radio Podcast, the most complete coverage of Detroit Tigers baseball, from the high-flying Tigers of Lakeland to the show.
All right, we're back from our exile, which I'll be honest with you, the more I think about it, the more I realize it was much, much needed on my behalf. I don't know about you two, but we'll get to that in a second. But welcome to Tigers episode 415. As is the first episode for 2022. I'm, of course, with Helio Castillo. Alongside me is Chris Brown and Uper, and our special guest, who's now a two-time guest now, Mr. John Moore. Will be talking about his Tigers article on Baseball Cloud blog. We'll get to that. He's a very good on the stats, and got a chance to meet him in May for West Michigan, right? That was in May?
Yeah, it was. It was right when the season started last year, the minor league season.
Mm-hmm. It seemed like a lifetime ago now, if you think about the grand scheme of things. But you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, our Media, and sister. Of course, we have our Patreon, and we have and there's skits from Toledo on YouTube. So we're on YouTube Live right now. And of course, the pod will be posted tomorrow on MotorCityBengals.com. Our top 20 is up. There's going to be some more articles about that. But honestly, Chris, I will say this. This is the longest period of time. December was my lowest output of articles, lowest output of baseball, and I was fine with it. It was before I would kind of like freaked out, but honestly, I know you've been relatively quiet, which is unusual for you.
Yeah.
But honestly, with this lockout, I think the lockout's well timed, but I went through 8 seasons of Psych in 2 weeks. What the hell is wrong with Psych? It's a good show, though. It's a good show, but it's just kind of strange.
You know, what's funny is I swore that there was a Saturday Night Live skit, like a game show about who's been watching Psych. But I was wrong. I was wrong. It was about Burn Notice.
Oh.
But like, what exactly is Burn Notice? That was the game show. But no, I've like Psych it's like a cult hit. They've made several movies out of it now. I don't think you're, it's not like you're a weirdo for watching that. But no, it's I don't know. Like, I wrote a handful of articles in December and did the prospects list and stuff like that. But yeah, it's tough to force yourself to write about baseball when baseball doesn't seem particularly interested in providing anything to write about, and we've got stuff to write about, but it's the holiday season and it's time for a break every now and then.
Yeah. And Uper, I know you probably maybe watched us play dice ball, but that was a lot of fun and extremely well for simply never doing that before to be well coordinated like that. It was, we could probably end up doing it again at some point.
It was gripping. Let me tell you.
I can't believe that it ended with a walk-off cycle from Rob Deere. What are the odds? The first time we play on,
And then the following day when I played with my brother, it was extra innings too. And this time I won in extra innings. But either way, yeah, there's been a lot going on in the last couple of days too. There's no sight of when the lockout's going to end. And it's just a lot of misery. But also at the same time, there's also some strangeness, which kind of coincided, happened within 2 days of each other. It was strange. First and foremost, Ken Rosenthal, who writes for The Athletic, and now The Athletic's been owned by the New York Times, which was acquired today, so that was announced. He was like, he's no longer part of the MLB network, as apparently he was critical of Rob Manfield, and Rob Manfield was like, nah, yeah, what? Nah. You can't talk about me like that, nah. And I thought that Dave, it was David Aldridge, who writes for the NBA, wrote a great tweet. He said, I was critical of the NBA. David started calling me and cussed me out. I never got fired for it. And the thin skin is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, like nothing says, hey, I'm in the right here, quite like firing people who are critical of you. Yeah, I don't know. It's nobody likes Rob Manfred, from what I can tell. It would be fun if the players would say, hey, you know what? We'll come back. Exact same contract, all these conditions. You just have to get rid of Rod Manfred as commissioner. It'd be funny to see that, but of course they won't.
Exactly. It's over the years, if you watch a lot of MLB Net, and I do, because I'm home with my son a lot, and it's always been fairly obvious that there's an unwritten rule there that they can't go hard after a certain club or the upper management of baseball, because they never did. Mm-hmm. So it's just so interesting that something as relatively mild as what Rosenthal said, I mean, it was kind of veiled. It wasn't a direct shot you know.
Yeah.
And now get him on the road to being out.
Right.
Yeah, and Ken Rosenthal has never been like, he's not the sort of guy who's going to throw bombs at about anything. So yeah, it really, I mean, like that's a good point. That's probably the most telling thing, is it, this wasn't like a scathing criticism or anything. It was just like, hey, things aren't great, you're out of here. So
John, what was your whole?
Well, yeah, it actually wasn't. It was about what he wrote during the 2020 season. It wasn't about this lockout. It was actually stuff that he just got fired this week for something he wrote in 2020 about when the pandemic shut down the season. So, yeah, it was ridiculous. I was pretty worked up about it.
yeah, didn't they say he was originally suspended for like 8 weeks or something like that, and then they finally like. Yeah, so I don't know if he wasn't penitent enough. He didn't perform his eight tasks that Manfred. Yeah, it's absurd, but that, I mean, it Manfred shows you who he is. We saw all about him in that Biogenesis documentary about
the juice ball one.
Yeah, what kind of guy he is. So it's not surprising, and it's disappointing that this sport we all love is just kind of run by these buffoons and small-minded, simple men.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you just go back to the network too. Some of the best stuff that I enjoy listening to comes from the journalists that they have on the shows, on the various shows, more so than the ex-jocks. I mean, I just think that they try to give us some input into the teams, but obviously they had that line that they couldn't cross. And I think now, as we go forward watching this, we're going to know, what we're hearing is very, it's not unvarnished, it's highly varnished.
Yeah, I mean, you assume that part of this is kind of a warning to anybody else at the network to like, mind what you say, and don't stray too far from the message this offseason, which is that the players are in the wrong.
Yeah.
Well, they're telling us Chris Russo is worth having around, but not Ken Rosenthal. Think about that.
Uh-oh, here it comes.
Oh man, I had it queued up too, but
this is getting to be a pain in the ass. Excuse my French, but I'm starting to get annoyed here.
That to me. Say that to anybody. Say it to somebody.
Yep.
Everybody. What's funny is I do not understand. It's just like, it's almost like a Big Brother's watching you kind of thing. It's like 1984-ish. In a way, with the whole situation and how it's unveiled with that, because I watch MLB Network. I love Matt Verstappen. I like that show. I don't like Harold Reynolds at all, because it's like cliche after cliche after cliche kind of thing. And some of the gatekeeping by some of the people at MLB Network is just astonishing. And Ken has done great things for charity. He's got with his bow tie foundation, what he's done. He's a good dude, and he was backed up by The Athletic, and then, just like I said, it was so weird that the next day they're like, the New York Times bought it, and so it seems really rather serendipitous that came that way.
Well, I remember hearing for a while now that Athletic was up for sale. It wasn't really started by sports people. I thought it was started by like venture capitalists or whatever. So it was like,
that's correct, yeah.
So this was always the end game. It'll be interesting to see what happens, what comes of it. I don't know. I assume they don't make much money, or I thought they were actually losing money. So they may be competition for us at Motor City Bingo soon with their,
Bring it. That's what I say.
Well,
bring it. Bring it.
David Hagan on.
Yeah.
Bring him on.
Yeah, I mean, Cody's good people. We've had some good
pivot
people.
to video.
Yeah. Emily Walden's good people. She wrote our golf article recently too. So, but before we get to John's article, I just wanted to talk about the newest Erie Sea Wolves manager, as there's a couple changes in the personnel department among the player development department for the Tigers. As at first, when I first saw this, I was kind of surprised, but then it was one of those things where I saw it at work, and I ended up I first was like, "Oh, what happened to Artie Gang? Or Artie
Baylor?
Artie Baylor, yeah, what happened and what have you?" And so I originally kind of just didn't know what to think, what to expect. But along the way, I did find out Brian Payne will be back at West Michigan. So they announced all sorts of development. So West Michigan, Dean Stills is going to be the pitching coach. CJ Wamsley, the hitting coach. Nick Renderson is going to be the developmental coach. So, and then there's a baseball info assistant, which I think is a new position. I believe I've never heard of that position. So,
yeah, I mean that could be somebody working with, TrackMan. That could be somebody who's just, who knows. But it is refreshing to see, and we've been talking about it all off season. It's like every 3 days it seemed like somebody would be like, hey, I'm leaving this and I'm blessed to join the Tigers as a developmental person. It's like, all right. Yeah, it's like their development staff has grown by, it's like 3 times bigger than it was before. And of course, the key is the name there at the top is no longer Dave Littlefield, is now Ryan Garco. So.
Yeah, and it was either this week or last week they just hired Max Green from Driveline too. To be the
that's last week. Yeah, good call.
Yeah, last week. It was last week, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so right now, if you look at the managers across the board, Gary Jones, who had familiarity with AJ Hinch, who actually managed him while he was in AAA Edmonton in 1998, takes over Toledo. Gabe Alvarez, who was a Tiger, came up in 1998. I remember watching that game against him in St. Louis in 1998. That's how that kind of like, as soon as I saw the name, I'm like, wow, that would surprise me. He takes over in Erie, but there's a USC tie into that, so that all makes sense because of the whole Southern California thing going on. Essentially, we're hiring everybody from that side of the country. So,
yeah. Well, it's interesting, and we will periodically see John Vanderwall, former West Michigan Whitecaps hitting coach, pop up and talk some smack about all sorts of stuff. And it's interesting because like there is that worry about the old boys club, people just hiring their friends or whatever for coaching positions. This feels like a more modern, justifiable version of that sort of thing. You're not necessarily hiring your friends, you're hiring people who are going to agree with you on how to develop players. And that consistency is so important from level to level to make sure that everybody's getting the same message or everyone's working together to help somebody fix a problem. They don't just get left out there because it's obvious that the Tigers realized that they were not developing players the way they should. They had some good stories recently, but you see other teams just consistently producing major league talent from their draft, from the international market, and the Tigers haven't been doing that. So good on them for, realizing they needed to get better.
It just seems like they're developing. I mean, obviously don't know a lot about all of these guys, but you get a sense of where they're coming from and what jobs they've had previously. And it just seems like they can have this trust of a widespread mentality in the system that's kind of fairly uniform and on the same page. And I think that trust is important. And I think hopefully that will be something we see dividends from.
Yeah. And what's nice to see too is that you have Pena, who did a really good job with the roster. He had big time roster turnover last year, quite a bit. He had some of the best prospects in the system, and then some of the guys he got from Lakeland they actually flourished pretty well and got back. And Lakeland went from Lakeland and West Michigan did well. Case in point comes to mind, Alfonso, who originally struggled but then came back and finished the year strong. Andrew Graham stays at Lakeland, and Mike Alvarez. And it looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, I think it looks like there's going to be one Florida league, or one team instead of two.
One complex. Well, it does seem to be the way that they have it only with one team there, which would be interesting. But I guess, given that there's still going to be fewer rounds in the draft and probably the similar amount of international players signed every year, it might make sense to have 2 DSL teams and 1 FCL team.
Yeah, there's going to be, what's interesting too is the hitting coach down in Lakeland is Francisco Contreras. And so I think there's going to be a lot of a flux of possibly the Latin talent coming to Lakeland this year from what it sounds like. And also across, Rafael Gill will be the one in the complex league. So, and then there's a bench development / development coach, and that you can find that at the Road to Detroit. We also posted the new development on our Tigers Facebook page, Minor League Report Facebook page. So you can find that all there. But I was excited to see Pena back because, like I said, I'm a big fan of him, what he's able to do. They also posted the Academy, Dominican Republic Academy, how that's all going to break down as well. So it's going to be, to me, what I've seen. It's refreshing. You mentioned it earlier, Chris. There's just it seems like a building of something down there, and then they also updated the entire player development department board. Stefanos Stroop is a pitching coordinator. They have Jorge Cordova, who's been with the organization for a while now. The assistant coordinator of pitching. The director of scouting minor league development admin is Cheryl Evans. So good to see some diversity there. We have, Arnie Baylor now is the base running coordinator in the outfield as well. So he's got 2 titles to his role. So either way, there's some changes across the board. And then I like this title too. And this is something that's really important based off the movie we've seen. Sharon Lockwood is the culture assimilation coordinator. And that's important for a lot of Hispanic players that come in to get assimilated and get comfortable with their surroundings and making sure that they know what's going on. And I really like that. That's a meaningful title. It's not some BS kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. It's anybody could tell you, if you're living on your own for the first time, you're 17, 18, 19 years old, and if you don't even speak the language and know how to get food, you're going to have trouble playing baseball. So helping these kids out, it only makes sense. It's amazing that more teams haven't spent more on this sort of thing. Yeah,
absolutely. And so that's about it. So like I said, there'll be an article posted on MotorCityBengals.com breaking it down a little bit more tomorrow. But so, John, I know you've been since graduation, you started continuing to this process of learning quite a bit. And last conversation we had with you, you did a really good job explaining more than just what spin is, the dynamics of everything. And we really enjoyed that conversation. But the reason why we brought you in addition to, it was funny because we talked about Nick Quintana, and I saw Quintana in there immediately. I'm like, I know we had some thoughts about Quintana. And this offseason to you, has it been impressive? And looking at some of the numbers you talked about, but overall, are the Tigers going in the right direction based off what they've done so far?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they're going in the right direction. Overall, I mean, I like the offseason so far. Like, they're not going to sign Carlos Correa, who a lot of people wanted, but I mean, overall, I mean, after the last couple of years, I don't think you can complain. And I definitely think that there's a chance they could maybe be a wild card team this year, which isn't, I mean, they haven't been anywhere near the playoffs since 2016. So I definitely like the way it's heading and revamp the whole player development system, like you just said. And things are definitely a lot better than they were 2 years ago, even. So.
Yeah. As far as some of the numbers you talked about too, about what Bias is going to bring to the table. One of the numbers that really stands out was the O swing percentage and the major league average. That was like that description. Mm-hmm. But can you talk about that a little bit, John, and how important that is to it for a hitter?
So yeah, O swing. So if anyone doesn't know, it's just the percentage of pitches outside the strike zone, which the hitter swings at. And in the article, I had the table, and it was like the major league average is always like right around 30%, and Baez is always like 45, 46%. So it's like way worse than league average. And I think with Baez, I think I mentioned this in the article too, but when I first saw it, I saw him when he was played against West Michigan, like maybe 10 years ago now. And he's always, when he came up in the major leagues too, he's always just had like incredible bat speed, like elite, like top of the scale. And the last couple of years, it's gotten worse. And I think that's going to make the swing and miss a lot more too. But he's also started making contact on pitches in the strike zone a lot less too. I think there's Z contact, which is percent of pitches in the strike zone, which the hitter makes contact with. And that was the lowest of his career last year too. And the bat speed, if that keeps declining, like it's going to obviously take away some of the power, which is probably plus in game power right now. And he's always near the top of the league in max exit velocity. But I think if the bat speed continues to go, the offense could get pretty rough. So. But I definitely like his glove at short. I mean, they need that with the young pitching in, especially when Eduardo Rodriguez, who I think we'll probably talk about, but he was one of the worst in the old baseball at converting ground balls into outs last year. So I think by having Baez there will really help with the pitching staff too.
It'll be interesting, to see what the bat speed does specifically over the next 2 years, because that's when the opt-out kicks
in. Right.
Does he hold it together offensively for 2 more years and they get 2 quality years from him, and then he bolts and then he can go, his back can slow down for somebody else.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the to John's point, I think one of the concerns was, I don't know who looked at it. I don't know if it might have been MLB Pipeline or Mike Petriello, whatever he writes for, looked at it, and Baez has seen some pretty severe declines in contact rates at fastballs above 95 miles an hour or something like that. So, yeah, it's definitely something to watch. I just tend to view him as a little bit of a unicorn, no matter what. Like, he's going to go through these stretches that make him look like he's not a major leaguer, and then there'll be stretches where he hits everything. And we see that with the Tigers have had a handful of guys like this kind of over the years where Nick Castellanos is similar. He's a guy who would swing at just about everything, but he had such an ability to make contact that it sometimes would work out for him. Baez is the interesting case where he swings at everything and doesn't make a lot of contact, but when he does make contact, it's hard. So yeah, there's going to be some trade-offs there. But I was looking at the other day, Victor Reyes swings out of the zone almost as much as Javi Baez. The difference is Victor Reyes swings in the zone less than Javi Baez. It's a very strange combination where he takes strikes and swings at balls, and he makes contact on a lot of stuff. So it's tough to figure out. But yeah, I don't know. We've litigated the Baez thing several times. He's going to be a super exciting player who's going to be really frustrating at times, I think.
And definitely after Willie Castro, Nico Goodrum, Jody Mercer, I mean, it's a big upgrade the last couple of years. So,
yeah, I mean, one of the things on defense, he has that range to get to just about everything, and it seems like a lot of his errors are the result. Because I think he was one of the, like, fielding wise, he and Fernando Tatis Jr. have a lot in common. They both seem to get to a ton of balls and throw a lot of balls away because they feel like they can make every single play. So I don't know. It's one of those things where you don't really want to rein a guy in, and you probably can't at this point. But if you could just peel back Baez's aggressiveness on both sides of the ball by like 5%, you could have a really great player, but it seems unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest takeaway right now too is what for the Tigers in terms of just shortstop. It goes back even a little further than that. It seems like it's just. I mean, there's the comparisons defensively of in terms of like who the Tigers have had recently. There's nothing. I mean, I can go back to even earlier in the 2000s. It's significant. I mean, he's even like. I mean. As much as solid as Johnny Peralta was, he's not Baez in terms of range and what have you defensively. Mm-hmm. But it's so weird to think the Tigers have been so apathetic or just so just anemic, I should say, anemic at shortstop. And that kind of leads into the second acquisition, which Johnny talked about, was in Raul Rodriguez, 5 years, $77 million, which was now looking at some of the contracts that happen afterwards. We talked about this before, is a bargain. And one of the things that we didn't really discuss, and you brought this up, was the benefit of him moving on the AL East. And you look at some of the numbers in the new Yankee Stadium and Fenway compared to the AL Central. What is he walking into in the likes of the White Sox and Cleveland? And Chris is smirking over there, so I know Chris is going to have something big to say. But go ahead, John.
Yeah, like last year, if you just look. Like, I feel like a lot of people just looked at his ERA, which was like 4.74 last year, but his expected ERA was only 3.50, and he actually had the best FIP of his career. And like I just mentioned, talking about Baez, he was, I think, might have been actually the worst pitcher at converting ground balls into outs. So I think he had a lot of bad luck. Like his BABIP against I have up is 3.63, which is unsustainable. But yeah, I like I mean, he's like a quality mid. He's not like a true ace or anything, but he's like a mid rotation guy, and he'll fill in nicely. But I still think they need to sign like another starter or two probably. But I mean, I like this signing a lot.
Sorry, Chris. I thought you were going to say something.
No, sorry. I'm looking at some stuff.
No, and even at the market, looking at what the left in the market right now, that's where I'm kind of like, you can go up the mark, you can go a little older with Zach Greinke, and I saw yesterday people were flipping out that Clayton Kershaw was at a Dallas Mavericks game. He's from the area, so there's an assumption that he's going to sign with the Rangers, which could be possible. Rangers signed everybody. They spent over $500 million this offseason so far. But in terms of starters, just looking at the free agent market and what's left, it is kind of brutal. And that's not kind of, it is brutal to me at least, because you look at a guy like Carlos Rodon, and normally Chris, you wrote an article about this last month. I like Carlos Rodon, but the injury risk might be too big, and it's just, that's where we haven't heard a peep about like anything he's done. I mean, obviously before the lockout, what he was going to do and what have you. There was no traction on him.
Yeah, and it seems like a pretty big red flag when the White Sox had him and he was awesome for them, and he came back and he wasn't so good, and they didn't give him a qualifying offer. Like, they probably know something that's not great there. But go ahead.
Look at the game log for the last couple. I mean, he struggled to get out of the fourth inning half the time. And anytime you watched, Steve Stone was always talking about that velocity was coming and going for him. So they're worried about that shoulder. There's no question.
Yeah, and the one thing I was looking up to John's point, Eduardo Rodriguez's BABIP last year, 363, is the highest since at least 2010 for any starting pitcher, any pitcher who threw 120 innings in a season.
Wow.
It's just basically the most unlucky, if you will, in at least a decade. So
yeah,
something to that.
And like the stuff doesn't really stand out that much, honestly. But if you watch him, he just always he has to locate that fastball just like around the edges of the zone. But he just has a lot of different ways to attack hitters. Like he has the four-seam fastball, sinker, cutter, and then he started throwing the changeup more recently. And he also has a slider, which is 44 inches of drop on average and a vertical approach angle of -9 degrees, which I should probably explain what vertical approach angle is, right? So it's just the vertical angle, the pitch when it crosses the plate, like, so it's always going to be negative because you're throwing off like an elevated surface, but it's just the vertical angle of the pitch as it crosses home plate. And that -9 was one of the top sliders in baseball last year. Like if you want a good example of a really like good vertical approach angle, a guy in the Tigers division, which the fans are all probably familiar with, is James Karinchak with Cleveland. But his is because his arm slot's way over the top. So vertical approach angle, it usually, it's influenced by arm slot, pitch location, and pitch type, obviously. Like curveballs are going to have a steeper vertical approach angle than fastballs. So I just thought that was interesting. I was looking at that the other day.
As far as, and then in terms of pitchers that are out there, one of the things some of the pitchers I was getting to look at was I did a kind of deeper dive on somebody mentioned in the Discord channel, which was Michael Pineda, and he just seems like there's numbers across the board is losing velocity a little bit, and his whip can continuously creep up a little bit. And he's also been injured. I mean, he doesn't stay healthy. He can pitch over 100 innings, which is something you want out of the fifth starter. You have Chris Archer, which, again, you don't know. He's just coming off that surgery where it's just kind of a liability. I would say maybe wait on what you can get from the likes of signing somebody like the gentleman from California, the Angels that is going to be injured to start the season. Dylan Bundy, who's going to start the season in IL. But the rest of the market, you have the likes of John Lester, who's not getting any older, probably looking to stay with a contender. J.A. Happ, going to be 40 this year. Scott Casimir, but again, it's kind of like I said, Garrett Richards, and then Carlos Martinez. But forget about Martinez. He's got a good. I think he might be his future for him would be a reliever. But is there any names, John, before I get to Chris and Uper? Is there any names on that list that kind of appeal to you at all, in a sense, from an analytical standpoint?
Yeah. I haven't really looked at the rest of the free agent market, but I was just looking at your thing you just came out with the other day, and I think you talked about Carlos Martin, and who else was that in there?
Oh,
Pineda,
yeah. Honestly, like you're legit trying to fill out the back of the rotation at this point. So I don't think you have to throw a ton of money at it, and Wentz is not ready yet, but he's close. I think Faedo's probably a reliever, so you definitely need someone else. But yeah, I don't know.
Walter brings up a good point in the YouTube chat. Is Matt Boyd the cheapest option or Peralta? And I wouldn't mind them bringing back Peralta as a fifth starter.
Yeah, me neither.
And Tyler Alexander, who there was a good question on Twitter yesterday from, I believe it was, forgot the gentleman's name that left that. It was Joe M. said that asking about if. And I'll ask you guys to read this question: if Tyler Alexander makes 25 or more starts, does that make the Tigers more of a contender? And go ahead, Chris.
Well, he pitched reasonably well last year. He was better than Matt Manning last year.
Yeah.
So, obviously he doesn't have the theoretical ceiling of Matt Manning, but if he pitches like he did last year and he makes 25 starts like that, that would be just fine. He was basically equivalent to Casey Mize last year. So, yeah, I don't think that's an ideal scenario. You probably want him as a depth starter, but I don't know. We've had some of these discussions in Discord, and I think I do worry about the Tigers' depth for starting pitching. We talked about it last year. They kind of, it was a small miracle that they were able to get through with Peralta and Alexander pitching as well as they did, but they had the good fortune of having three young starters who they could use. Manning obviously wasn't great, but they needed him and he was there. But if they have injuries this year, we look last year, who did they lose? They lost Boyd after a handful of starts. They lost Turnbull. They lost Tehran immediately. They lost Urania for a good portion of the season. You have to figure they're going to lose a handful of starters this year. And if it's, if they lose Mize and Skubal for a good portion of the year, you got Rodriguez and not a whole lot. Mm-hmm. So they need to add some depth. I think what I would like to see them do is kind of, you maybe target guys who you can put in the bullpen now or at the beginning of the year. And then if the need arises, they can be stretched out a bit to start a few games. And I don't know if that's like a Colin McHugh kind of, he used to start. I think he's more of a reliever now. But so, some of these guys we've seen at other teams like Garrett Richards, or you mentioned Chris Archer. He's an interesting name but guys along that route where you don't have to pay a ton of money probably, and you promise them a chance to start, in spring training. And then if not, you can put them in the bullpen. Other than that, you're going to have to get some more of those AAA guys. You end up with Drew Hutchison starting again, or we may see, John mentioned, we may see Wentz, we may see Alex Faedo, we may see Bo Brisky or Garrett Hill even. They may have to go deep into the minors to get some starts this year.
And don't forget, something that I did see in Venezuela recently was the possibility of having Franklin Perez pitch this winter season. But that was just talk. I was listening to a Venezuelan baseball podcast. That's how, and during my break, I did not forget my duties, but it was like at the same time I was listening. My Spanish I'm polishing up my Spanish this year. I'm planning on doing some more Spanish. And so I was listening in, and they mentioned Franklin Perez, and my ears perked up a little bit, but I think he's still recovering, but it would be interesting to see what they can get out of him, because who knows what state he's at right now.
Yeah, and it feels, we talked about this before, it feels like, he's done for. He's had so many injuries. He's an old man. He's 2 years younger than Alex Faedo. So, it's not too late for him. You just, he needs to get out and pitch.
And to tell you what, the people listening out there need to know that this podcast we're monitoring Venezuelan baseball podcasts for Tigers news. That is going
Really,
the distance for our listeners. Okay? Raj can be proud of this.
It's also getting solid arepas recipes.
Yeah.
Someone just sent you Smiley in the chat. I was also going to say Rick Porcello's still out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is I
And-
feel like we're like Rick Porcello is Carmen Sandiego. Where is Rick Porcello? Like,
There's another guy who's way younger than it seems like he should be. Is he even 33 yet?
I don't think
No.
so. I think he's 31.
Yeah,
So Rick Porcello is
31, I'm pretty sure.
31 and 274. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
it's
he was-
ridiculous.
He was 19 in 2009 when he came up.
Well, he just turned 20, but yeah.
Yeah, you're right. He just turned 20, but
Yeah, still, I mean, he's December. He just turned. Oh wait, no, he just turned 33. Okay, so he turned 33 December 27th. Still 33. That's 6 years younger than Justin Verlander.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he's a guy like I don't know. We've seen this a little bit where there are a lot of guys. Kyle Seager retired. He didn't necessarily have to. Buster Posey retired. I think there are a lot of players who don't necessarily. And I wonder if it's that having that year off for the pandemic or having more time with your family made people go, hey, you know what? I'm doing okay. I've got tens of millions of dollars. That'll do. We can make this work. So who knows if Porcello will ever come back? Which is interesting because I thought he was another guy like Rodriguez who, in his final year of pitching, which I guess was 2020, right, with the Mets.
Yeah.
His peripherals were great, but the ERA was ugly. But it was like his best FIP ever. So I don't know. I thought he'd come back at some point, but who knows? Maybe he's just done.
Yeah. And then he had a really bad looking year with Boston before that too. But like I'm looking right now, his BABIP against was 373 in 2020, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it was like one of the highest strikeout rates of his career, one of the lowest walk rates. So
Yeah, there were a lot of things pointing, at least to public analysts. There were a lot of things that were pointing. Maybe behind the scenes, everything was getting ugly. But yeah, he's a guy who didn't seem done. But if you want to be done, you could be done.
yeah, especially because I mean, this whole there's been no type of arrangement, no type of anything discussed about what's the next contract going to be, and maybe that's what it is. They're just like, I don't want to sit through the BS.
Yeah, and I mean that's one thing you touched on a little bit, but it's something that is kind of a bummer, as I think a lot of us were sort of planning on this lockout being a little bit of like just going through the motions. They'll figure things out and get ready for the start of the season. But all the insiders, the people who are familiar with the negotiations slash lack of negotiations, seem to think that this is going to last a lot longer than they originally thought. And it may end up costing us some regular season games, which is a giant bummer. I don't think fans want to see that after the last couple of years, but that may be what happens.
Yeah. There's no, I don't know, getting back to the article real quick too, is just this, before we move on to the article rather, when you see, I forgot who tweeted out earlier that the negotiations, this is an empty table. I mean, it is the first of the year. I get it. There's the first week of everybody's coming back to work and people are still on vacation in some cases. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about, John, was we look at the outfield situation right now and you look at what the potential outfield is going to be in the likes of Badu, Grossman, Reyes, potentially Green. There's a lot of talk that it looks like Torkelson and Green made some bold statements. They may make the team out of spring training. But as far as the outfield is concerned, do you think the Tigers need to add another bat? Because I firmly believe they do, but is it just going to, with Badu's batting average against lefties, is this going to be a platoon situation, do you think? Or are they going to have to, what do you think it's going to be, a sophomore jinx? Or there's a lot of factors that play into this.
yeah, I definitely think they should look into adding another outfield bat. I've mentioned this before when I was on, but I'm not a big Victor Reyes guy at all. I'm just not. But yeah, I definitely think you should at least look when the lockout ends, looking at adding someone else for out there, because yeah, like it's probably Badu, Grossman, maybe Green, probably won't break the team out of camp, but And you don't know what you're going to get out of Green and Torkelson too when they come up. Like, I feel like a lot of people think they're just going to come up and just like mash right away and just be like all-stars, but you don't know what you're going to get. Like just last year in Seattle when Kelenic came up, he really struggled and got sent back. Like that could easily happen to one of those guys too. So you definitely should add someone else out there. And someone just mentioned Andrew Mccutchen in the chat. Wouldn't really get that at all. I feel like they should go for someone younger. But
yeah, that's that was my impression too. Somebody asked that on Twitter, and I thought that McCutchen. I love Andrew McCutchen. I love him. He's a really good team player. He had some really kind words about Kamara Barti, who, by the way, passed away suddenly and was going to see his father, and that was it was a big loss for anybody who knew him. But I love what McCutchen said. He came out on Twitter and was talking about his experiences with them, and that was really cool to see, and a very heartfelt message. But I would rather go younger or something like that. I thought Michael Conforto, he was just shy of hitting 30 home runs a couple of years ago, is out there. I like him as a bat, although his numbers, again, he does have a WRC plus of over 100 the last couple seasons. It's been dropping a little bit, but
well, the one thing we mentioned, it may be neither here nor there, but that John mentioned, I think the new hitting coordinator in the minors, is it Gordon? Is that his name?
I said Max Green earlier. It's Max Gordon though.
Max Gordon, the outfield with Michael Conforto at Oregon State. They were on the same team back in the day. Not that would mean anything. He's going to be a major leaguer, but hey, you use your connections. What are you going to get? No, I don't know. I think the outfield market really doesn't seem to have. It didn't seem to establish itself very much in the first free agency period, if you will. Who we got? Garcia signed, Marte signed, but they're still like Schwarber's still out there. Castellanos is still out there. I don't know. Over at Fangraphs, the crowd was predicting 2 years and $24 million total for McCutchen. I'd be shocked. I think he'll be lucky to get 1 year and $10 million probably. Yeah. He's a great leader guy. Leadership that's worth something. But I don't know if he's a regular anymore.
Yeah, Schwarber's out there still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he's not. Wouldn't play him in the outfield, but
there's Eddie Rosario too.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He's just fresh off the World Series, and
Peterson.
Yeah.
Is Solaire a free agent?
Yep.
He is.
He's still available too.
He turned his life around second half last year. I'll tell you that.
And I got to give you a lot of. And Michael Meyer in the YouTube comments said you can fix the outfield in June and July to trademark if the young guys' injuries cut down production. And he mentioned Atlanta showed it. It was really well done. And you're right, Michael. It was something that for once for the Braves, the trade deadline actually paid off. But you've been on this kick for 2 years. You've been advocating this long before we even have about this outfield situation. So it's to me, it starts to kind of you realize across the board, if Riley Green, let's say Riley Green doesn't come out as what John mentioned earlier, you look at the depth and back down in AAA, and there's nobody. I mean, you can have Jacob Robson come up, and that's great and all, but it's even down in Erie gets a little scary down in Erie.
Yep. The last time I came on, we were talking about the outfield too, and how there was just no depth.
Yeah.
Well, you got to figure out eventually what Daz Cameron is. You got Derek Hill. They've got some bodies there, but yeah, I don't know if anybody is really going to step up and be a legit MLB player. But who knows? Maybe this is what the developmental staff is all about. They're going to come up and fix all these guys. Yeah. But, no, I don't know. Somebody else, I don't remember who it was. Somebody suggested Jorge Solaire, and it sounded interesting, but he's really, he's a corner bat only, and that is pushing it. He's a guy who is not a good defender.
No.
And yeah, at this point, I don't know. You either want a starter for sure, or somebody who can capably fill all three spots, and I'm not sure if Solaire fits there. I'm not sure who does actually right now.
But but the one thing he does have is he has that 47 home run season, whether that's going to be his outlier season or not. That's on his resume, and he had that hot finish last year, which he was leading off, and he was dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So
And he loves Comerica Park.
He needs some power in the outfield.
By the way, his slash line, by the way, Uper at Comerica, 307, 400, 653 with an OPS over 1,000. With I don't know, 8 home runs, and he essentially is 31 for 401. And why I couldn't say that in 30 games at Comerica Park.
He's not a perfect fit for the Tigers. Chris is right about that. I mean, there's a lot of deficiencies there where he's not perfect, but at the same time, I don't know. The perfect guy might not be on the free agent market, you know. So if I'm going to put some money into somebody, a guy who had 47 homers a couple years ago, not the worst spending.
Yeah, I mean, he would definitely, it would lengthen the lineup. But to Michael's point, the Braves went out there where they added 4 outfielders, and they proved cheaply. But baseball's like every sport; it's a copycat league. So I'm not sure getting 4 outfielders will be as cheap next year. I think some other teams that have outfielders be like, hey, look what these guys did last year. So that might, and other teams might get the same idea. So I don't know. I'm torn because I do feel like there's still a couple young guys they really should get at bats in the majors to see if they have anything. And I'm not quite sure if they're really ready to compete this season. And that's the only thing that if they really want to go for it, then there are outfielders out there. They can certainly upgrade there and it would be worth it. But I don't know. I'm just not sure if they're quite ready for that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just one of those things where I think the Tigers are another year away. And then the last thing I wanted to ask you about, John, in terms of some of the production, we talked about Eric Haas a little bit back in December and him kind of cornering the backup catcher and then kind of playing out left field. In terms of what are your thoughts about him in the platoon-like situation? He's going to be serviceable at best, but it just seems like is in the outfield? Is he a liability? I mean, I thought he played a decent outfield last year.
Yeah, I thought it would be way worse than it was, honestly. But I mean, you're obviously putting him out there for the power. He's always been a guy, even in the minor league, just a guy with huge raw power. But yeah, I mean, ideally you don't want him out there, and they even had him taking ground balls at first base last year, if I remember correctly. Wasn't it him?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Which he's out there for his bat, obviously, and I'm pretty sure his offense was sustainable from last year, but he's just too big of a liability for me to be comfortable putting him out with any consistency out in the left field. I would just rather use him as the backup catcher.
Yeah, it looks like he played 2 innings at first base last year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that kind of confused me, I don't know if it confused me, but they only played him in left field, and he's a catcher. He's got a big arm. Like, why did they ever try him in right field? I feel like right field might be a little bit easier to play in Comerica, but maybe they just worry about right center. Yeah. Giving him, killing him in the Bermuda Triangle out there. But I don't know.
Yeah, there's been talk about moving that part in too. It's been talked about more and more, but I don't know who that is. I know it's been a constant complaint. I just feel like that's going to backfire on them. You've made this kind of dedicated your rebuild with these young pitching, and you're gonna Tarek Skubal out there giving up 60 home runs without the fence moved in.
Yeah,
it's going to be trouble. But hey, they might hit a few more dingers, so it'll be worth it.
We appreciate the questions on YouTube tonight. So I know
absolutely
we didn't really, to be honest, I should have promoted the show a little more last week, but I've just been New Year's, everything. It's just the holidays, everything, get back and swing things. But we'll be doing shows pretty much until baseball comes back. But again, formatting wise, will be a little different because, again, unless there's breaking news coming out constantly about a lockout or what have you. So the baseball talk will be there, but there'll be some elements, especially because there's in terms of the NBA, there's the NBA going on right now, the NHL, the Michigan getting their asses kicked by Georgia, which we shall not talk about, but that happened, and Michigan State won over Pitt. So good job by the Spartans there. But beyond that, it's just like in terms of sports and everything, this is kind of that weird point in the off season too, where if you don't pay attention to the basketball or you don't pay attention to the game tonight for the Wings and Ducks, by the way, was canceled due to COVID. So it's so weird on a Thursday or Friday night sometimes that there's barely anything going on in terms of even the bowls this year were kind of the Mayo Bowl. That was bad.
So, Raj, will Harbaugh be coaching the Bears or the Giants next year?
I think he's going to go to the Bears.
I thought it was the Raiders.
Yeah.
The Vikings.
The Raiders. But he has a really good connection. I remember him as him specifically with the Bears and the Colts. I don't even remember him as a Charger, but he was captain comeback in the Chargers too. But yeah, Walter brings up a good one. That was a Class C move by Cameron Maben, and I hopefully hope he ends up in the booth. I think he'd be a really good guy in the booth to have. Or him and Austin Jackson. I want Austin Jackson back.
I think Austin Jackson did some radio games last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did
the
a
stuff,
really good job.
The off the field stuff that Maben has been doing has been great, and I'd be happy if he continued doing that because it's a lot of outreach and getting underserved communities into baseball, which I think is awesome. And he and Rick Porcello are great examples of guys who, like, it feels like they didn't necessarily live up to the hype, but they were actually fantastic major league players. Like they far better than what is average for players drafted, where they were. So that's one of those things we see. I don't know, somebody brought up in the Discord chat about Jackson Jobe, his ceiling. And it was like a Hall of Famer. It's like, come on, man. Like, there's like a 2% chance he even plays for 10 years in the majors. Like, but in any event, yeah. I mean, Cameron Maben, great 3-time Tiger. How many people could say that?
Maben stuck around forever too. When did he come up? Like 06, 07. So I mean, 14 years is not a lot of people can say they played 14 years. And
he was in that spectacular 2005 draft. We mentioned McCutchen. Somebody else mentioned Justin Upton. They were both in that draft. You're talking, who else was in that? Tulowitzki, Ryan Braun, Ryan Zimmerman. Just one of the great drafts of all time. Mike Pelfrey.
You subtly that you threw that in there.
But yeah, I mean, he ended up he had a couple. I don't know if he ever made the All-Star team. I don't think he did, but maybe he did with the Padres. He had like a 50 steal season.
It doesn't look like he did.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean that's a strong, solid MLB career, even if it wasn't necessarily as the Willie Mays superstar some people thought he might be.
Mm-hmm. Maben's only 34 too. Holy crap!
Yeah.
34? Wow, I thought it was 30, 36 or something.
It is interesting to think of him as his retiring before Miguel Cabrera, for whom he was the a prospect traded for. But
yeah, they could put him in the booth and take Jack Morris out. That's fine. Anybody
too.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Austin Jackson and Dan Dickerson last year, as you mentioned, John, in the booth, they were a really good combo. I thought they really, considering that they never worked with each other, I thought Austin Jackson did a really good job when they were in Texas. That was
I was listening to those. I thought he did a really good job.
Yeah, out of all the guest ones that they just had like one-offs and everything, he was probably by far he stood out more than anybody else, I think, because he also had the ability, the cadence to know when to talk and not to talk. And he just said enough, got out, and then went back in when he needed to. And that's hard to do. Like, trust me, especially Chris this year when you're in the booth with Dan Hastings. Like, I was like, I would wait for when Dan was about to make the call or do the call. I wouldn't talk because I'm like, I'm not gonna step on his call. And then he would, go back. I would wait for him to address me because it's like I'm not gonna be that guy going, oh, blah blah blah. No one cares. You want to hear what Dan has to say. So, but. So, but at any rate, the last thing I wanted to end the podcast with before we get out of here is, John, what do you have going on coming up? What are your plans this year? We're going to see you at some more minor league games this year again, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So actually that article, because I just started a new day job, that article I wrote was actually like the first thing I've done since September, I think. But now I'm settled into my job and stuff. I'm going to start doing stuff a lot more consistently. I have something I'm finishing on Ohtani that should probably be out next week.
Cool.
And then I wanted to look in. I was doing a Brewers article on their pitching development. So yeah, that should be out in the next couple of weeks too. But I'm gonna be doing stuff a lot more consistently now that I'm settled in my job and stuff. So
Very cool.
Yeah, and they're in Baseball Cloud a little bit. Explain. I saw that they have a lot of the analytics. The Yacker Tech, which does a really good job with tracking pitching and all sorts of stats like that. Talk about that website a little bit and how people. Of course, you can find them at baseballcloud.com and on Twitter at baseballcloudus. But talk about that site a little bit and how'd you get involved in it?
yeah, well, I did my internship there last year, and it's just like it's a baseball technology and data company based out of Florida. And they're actually, if you follow their Twitter right now, they're down at the ABCA this week with some pretty cool stuff. Like they have a whole setup for the new Analyze R thing that come out, and they have Pitch R and Ball R, which if you go to their website, the Ball R thing's pretty cool to play around with. It's just like a ball, and you can like change the spin axis and stuff. I've used that in a couple of my articles there. It's really cool to help. It really helps you like, I don't know, like get a feel for the metrics and stuff and what they are. Like if you don't know much about like spin axis and stuff, like you can just go in there and play around. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, I saw that they have a QR code right now. If you go down, if you're down in that neck of the woods, Johnny Gomes is speaking on the 8th in the morning. So if you want to check that out, and I retweeted it so everybody can find that. But yeah, that's something that I'm taking the next couple of weeks to investigate more because I like the fact that it says no more spreadsheets. And or somebody from my day job, I work in spreadsheets all day, and then I do something I like. And I love my day job, don't get me wrong, but when I do something like for baseball, I'm like another spreadsheet. And Chris is right there as a guru, who's like, wow, no problem. Dude, you don't be so modest, Chris, because go ahead.
I use spreadsheets a lot, but I'm not like a spreadsheet wizard. I can do some small math formulas and color code things. That's about it.
It's more than some people can do. Trust me. We work in spreadsheets all day for Google Analytics and running reports on sales leads and stuff like that. After a while, it's just like it all blends together. It's not interesting. I mean, it's interesting at the time, but in terms of baseball stats, if you find something that can get rid of the spreadsheets, I'm all for it. So,
yeah.
But yeah, there's some really cool data that you can check out there. And so, and you can follow John and John Moore on Twitter. And I'm glad to see you back in the swing of things with baseball. It's always good to have you on and good to talk to baseball. And again, when we do a trip to West Michigan this year, hopefully we'll go out before the game, have a couple of soda pops and what have you, and what have you. And so and have some extended conversation.
For sure. Yep. Thanks for having me, as always.
All right, no problem. And like I said, we'll be back next week. Again, we'll be exploring some more formats, and it wouldn't be a podcast about Charlie with the squeaker.
He's coming. He's got the new. Yeah, we took the carpet off the stairs, so now he can stumble down the stairs now with the squeaker. What? What are you doing?
there he is. He's
hello.
Yeah, if you're watching us on YouTube,
He doesn't like being on camera, I guess.
Oh, Walter, thank you for the comment about the hat. Yeah, that's the Cyberpunk collection on Hat Club. And so listen to Hat Club. If you're listening, please sponsor the show. Just send me hats, send Uper hats, and I'm sure your son would want a hat, right, Uper?
Oh, absolutely. He's got to augment the jersey collection with some hats.
Yeah, this is the Cyberpunk collection. It's got that right there, the 2000.
Nice.
And it comes with a really cool pin too that let me put right here. And real quick. So you can find the pin. Yep. Comes a little cool little Hat Club pin. So if you collect
Does
pins,
it come with any NFTs?
dude, if I hear the word NFT again, I'm gonna scream.
Look, I just need to spend a bunch of Ethereum on them.
Gary V, I looked up something about NFTs. All of a sudden now I have these YouTube suggestions. What do you need to know about NFTs? It's like, stop. So, at any rate, we'll see you next week. Have a good week, everybody.